You actually knew the bands Oingo Boingo and They Might Be Giants, and I was one of those people. What were your thoughts on Fast? Oh my God.
I'm so wasted.
See Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine video edition. We are talking about a high school comedy classic, Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah.
Sean Penn, not his first movie, but kind of gets his big name out there.
Totally awesome.
Dave, what were your thoughts on Fast Times?
Yeah, it was stupid.
Oh my God. We have a bit of a disagreement on the podcast. A movie I like, Dave does not like.
This movie carries reasonable cultural weight, definitely receding in modern times because it is 40 years old. But even when I was in high school, I never understood people's fascination with this film. 80s pot culture and coming of age.
People on moods should not drive.
Kyle has a weird thing about coming of age movies, a softness,
I do.
a weakness. There are coming of age films in every decade. In that respect, it's not a terrible film, but I feel like it just doesn't hold up that well. I didn't really enjoy it.
You don't shut up, I'm gonna kick 100% of your ass.
We learned it's female directors.
Amy Heckerling.
The women aren't stupid in it, and we
Right.
get some good insight that way. I just couldn't really get into, I don't know, teenage life in the early 80s. So I didn't like the movie. I'm going to get crucified.
The more we do this show, it's so funny, like the aspects that just getting your craw. Well, I wasn't a teenager in the 80s, so I can never understand this movie. It's a very weird perspective, in my opinion, but regardless.
I just didn't like it. I don't like the people.
I did like this movie quite a bit. I think what I was so compelled by was Jennifer Jason Leigh and her journey throughout this film. What was interesting, and I think this is in part from Amy Heckerling, we should credit a little bit of Cameron Crowe's screenplay. A woman being the center of a wacky teenage comedy, but is not shown, in my opinion, to be like a whore just for liking sex. Like I think that's an important point that pushes this past what some of these films do, which is they're just there to show TNA and horny boys. And I think this goes past that. And I just found a lot of the individual scenes really, really funny. Do I think this is top tier teenage comedy? No, I actually would not go that far. But I think it's a solid little film that showcases some great actors.
Yeah, a lot of people are in this film. Isn't it telling that it's a female-directed main character, but the only thing people remember is Sean Penn being high?
True, yes.
Right?
It is interesting that that's the big takeaway.
Yeah.
Although, not to derail this too much, I find it a lot of times with an iconic scene. Yeah, I mean, like that's the iconic scene. Yeah. It's there. But like, there's all this other stuff that I think is far more interesting.
Give the American public too much credit sometimes.
Maybe. We have Cameron Crowe, Wunderkind.
Full German.
Graduates school at 14 or 15 years old, whatever it is.
I'm 15.
Starts working for
Just
Rolling
watch
Stone.
Almost Famous.
He goes back to high school to write a book about teenage life in America in the late 70s, early 80s. Immediately gets optioned for a film. Skyrocketed into fame.
Yeah, it was
Iconic
good.
film.
It was fine.
It's fun.
There are gratuitous scenes in it. That's, on par for what was going to sell. Maybe that was producer interference too. If Phoebe Cates going to be in this, I need to see her breasts.
You might not be totally wrong. The soundtrack is well known as well. That was also Amy Heckerling's hand in bringing that. Oingo Boingo, Dave. Oingo Boingo.
We were watching Celebrity Jeopardy and a question came up and I'm like, oh my God, Oingo Boingo.
There's a very specific type of person. You actually knew the bands Oingo Boingo and They Might Be Giants, and I was one of those people.
Sean Penn's in it. It is fascinating. It's probably his greatest acting role, considering he would play such brutal, angry people.
I was saying,
And he played pretty successfully an idiot in his films.
I guess the one last thing I'll say is Judge Reinhold, kind of a big name in the 80s. I totally feel his pain because they really do sum up what it's like to work in retail or in food in this movie.
It says 100% guaranteed, you moron.
They nailed it on the head.
If there's one thing Hollywood writers and Hollywood actors are good at, it's depicting the grind before they become famous. Working at shitty restaurants.
Before they're almost famous. What are we watching next week, Dave?
I have absolutely no idea.
It's another gross out comedy.
Is it a comedy?
We're going to be talking about Porky's. The top grossing Canadian film of all time.
This thing made... Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
We'll talk about it.
They're the students of Ridgemont High.